just like Obed-Edom.
I know. Even this gets even better because Romans 11 talks about that in the end times, the Jews are going to be called to jealousy.
So those are questions that we want to invite you to
ask.
really ask the Lord today.
David was called to jealousy because of the blessings that Obed-Edom's home.
To make a place, to make a space, to find a place where the presence of the Lord could be comfortable, where his presence would be hosted. Today we're going to talk about a very important chapter, and it's Psalms 132. And these Psalms includes one of David's vows that he made before the Lord in regards to building the house for the Lord or hosting the presence of the Lord in his generation. And we're going to really take a look at what it includes, why Solomon pray this to the Lord. Why did he bring this to remembrance? Because Psalm 132 expresses a lot of David's heart in regards to the tabernacle.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about the establishment and the reestablishment of the Tabernacle of David. I think we're going to take around 2 or 3 sessions to develop the whole topic. But it's very important for us to understand the initial establishment so that we can take our part in the reestablishment in our generation and in the generation to come. So Psalms 132 verse 1 says, "Remember, O Lord, in David's favor, all the hardships he endured, how he soared to the Lord and bowed to the mighty one of Jacob. I will not enter my house or get into my bed. I will not give sleep to my eyes or slumber to my eyelids."
So first of all, this is a very important part because he's saying, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to take rest or be lazy, but I'm going to be diligent until, says verse 5, until I find a place for the Lord.
And we can see here that this is Solomon, and he's remembering the Lord. He's saying, remember, O Lord, David's hard work. Remember what he vowed to you. And the vow was very clear that he will not give rest to his eyes until what? Verse 5. Until I find a place for the Lord, a dwelling place for the mighty one of Jacob.
So he was very into David. He was so eager to make a place, to make a space, to find a place where the presence of the Lord could be comfortable, where his presence would be hosted. And that is exactly gathering people. And that is exactly what the Tabernacle of David was. And then we see in verse 6 where it says, "Behold, we heard of it in Ephrathah. We found it in the fields of Jar." He's talking about the presence. He's talking about the ark. And then it says, "Let us go to his dwelling place. Let us worship at his footstool." I love this invitation that he makes. He says, we heard of it in this place. We found it in this place. Let's go there. Let's go to that place. "Arise, O Lord, and go to your resting place, you and the ark of your mind. Let your priests be clothed with righteousness, and let your saints shout for joy." So what was David's vow, basically? That he would not rest until he would find a place to host the presence of the Lord.
And
on the earth.
And I like verse 6 because it says, we heard of it in
Ephrathah.
We heard of it in Ephrathah. We found it in the fields of Jar. And he's saying, let's go get it. We need that presence. We need that established in Mount Zion. Because he understood the importance of having the presence of the Lord as the center of his ruling, of his government.
And I love that he says, let us go to his dwelling place. It's not just for me. He's not just saying also, I found it. This is just for King David. Right. No, he's inviting more people into these seeking out his presence and making a place for the Lord.
And Solomon, his son, understood this vision in such a great way. He saw his dad. He saw David rule, reign over Israel. under this design to the point that he decides to keep going with it. The tabernacle continued to function during Solomon's reign. 4 years into his reign, Solomon begins to build the temple. 1 Kings 6:1 says, in the 418th year after the people of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Siv, which is the second month, he began to build the house of the Lord. And then if we jump to verse 38, it says that, and in the 11th year, in the month of Bul, which is the 8th month, the house was finished in all its parts, according to all its specifications. He was 7 years in building it.
And there were so many kings after David and that kept this design, that continue the worship in the tabernacle. And there are some that didn't. And we're going to take a look at that later in later sessions. But right now we want to take a look at what was the journey of the Ark of the Covenant? What was that journey of David bringing the Ark back to Jerusalem? Because it's important that we know that.
We see Solomon building the actual temple for the presence and walking in the design of David. But we need to study a little bit of the history of how David got the ark into that place initially. So the ark had been lost to the Philistines, and they had it for centuries. The problem was that the Philistines had the ark, and the only thing that was producing in them was judgment. Judgment was over them because they had the ark. They were not treating the ark in the right way, and they were the enemies of the Israelites. So they decide to put the ark in like a procession in this car. Like a cart with cattle, and they send it away from them. In 1 Samuel chapter 6, verse 14, we find this specific part. And it says, the cart came to the field of Joshua of Beth Shemesh, and there it stopped beside a large rock. The people chopped up the wood of the cart and sacrificed the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord. Then, if we go to 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 1, it says, so the men of Kiriath Jearim came and took up the ark of the Lord. They brought it to Abinadab's house on the hill and consecrated Eleazar, his son, to guard the ark of the Lord.
So this is the first time that David attempts to bring the ark back to Jerusalem.
So in this moment, David knows that the ark is not in the Philistine hands anymore. It is in Abinadab's house. And he makes the first attempt to go and get the ark. He calls 30,000 men to come with him. They're trained in how they're going to do it, how they're going to worship, how they're going to do everything. And David starts asking. Here's the problem. He starts asking and inquiring of men on how to bring the ark. So they come to an agreement, and they say, we need to put the ark in a cart, just like the Philistines did, and we need to put oxen to pull the cart and bring the cart to where we want it.
And it's in 1 Chronicles 13:1 where he talks or seeks advice from men instead of God. Because we know that in the life of David, we see many times that it says, and David inquired of the Lord. You can go to 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, and it's there.
But not in this moment.
Times. But in this time, it says, 1 Chronicles 13 verse 1 says, David attempts to move the ark. Verse 1 says, David consulted with all his officials, including the generals and captains of his army. So he went ahead and asked, what do we do? But he didn't go to the Lord. He went to his officials.
So the problem is not asking people. The problem is asking people without asking the Lord. Because we can ask the Lord, and of course we can seek advice. That's completely biblical, and that's how it should be done. But in this moment, he just asked people. We don't see anything in the Bible saying that he inquired of the Lord. And we know it because we are going to read later that after this mistake, he goes and seek counsel in the law of Moses. So the problem with this way of pulling or moving the ark is that as it started the procession, the ark was moving, it was going to fall, and this guy Uzzah stretches his hand so that the ark wouldn't fall on the ground, and he dies in that moment. Everyone is just in awe.
Yeah.
Someone died because of the presence of the Lord. They don't know what to do. They just stop the procession. They stop everything that they're doing. They need to reconsider how they're supposed to move the ark in this from now on.
Yeah, and this guy Uzzah, he didn't want the ark to fall down. Like he was not doing anything
It wasn't anything wrong.
Like he just didn't want it to fall down, but that wasn't the way.
That wasn't the right way.
That wasn't the way that God instructed them to carry the ark.
There's a Bible teacher from the 1800, beginning of 1900, Arthur Pink, and I want to put on the screen 4 things that he mentions about this specific moment in the history of the Ark of Covenant.
Yes, because this moment can be very, very intense.
Yeah.
You can think, why did God just kill him in there if he was...
They were trying to get the ark
they were helping.
to the correct place. So Arthur Pink says, pursuing God's ends according to man's means will not bring about God's will. Number 2, ignoring God's prescriptions will never ultimately bring God's power. Number 3, following the ways of the flesh will always give you the outcome of the flesh, which is death. In this case, Uzzah died.
Yeah.
Following the ways of the Spirit will always give you the outcomes of the Spirit, which is life.
Yeah.
And number 4, David had the right vision and the right passion. Here's the key: with the wrong method, and it was a disaster. God's will must be accomplished in God's way.
So many times we can have the zeal, the passion, the desire. We might be even doing good things for the Lord, but what if the Lord didn't call us to do it in that way? So how important is the life of the Spirit to live in unity with the Spirit, that we're seeking His will in everything that we do?
And this goes in hand with that prayer house, with the house of prayer, because you might be thinking, why are we talking about this? But the prayer house, remember that it is a place of government. It's a place of justice. It's a place where we come and inquire of the Lord. Even if we're going to go out and evangelize, we're going to go out and give food, we're going to go out and do this and that and pray for people. We need to come as a group of people, gather together, pray and ask the Lord, what do you want us to do? How do you want us to do it? Do you even want us to do this today or tomorrow? When it's asking the Lord, inquiring of the Lord as we seek Him, as we look at His character and we're impacted by who He is, then we go and do. Mary and Martha, and we have talked about that a few times.
No, Proverbs 3, verse 5 and 6, very well-known passage, but it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not depend on your own understanding. So David definitely depended on his own understanding. And it says, verse 6, seek His will in all you do, and He will show you which path to take. Don't be impressed with your own wisdom, verse 7. Instead, fear the Lord and turn away from evil. So how important it is to seek the way of the Lord.
Right.
We might already know how to do many things, and that's the problem. Many times we trust on our own agenda, structure.
That we don't even ask Him.
That we don't even go to the Lord, and we need to go to the Lord.
Now, out of this disaster, something good happened. We see that after Uzzah dies and they don't know what to do with the ark stays at Obed-Edom's house. And it stays in here for 3 months. 2 Samuel 6:11 says,
the ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite for 3 months. And the Lord blessed him and his entire household. So this guy, Obed-Edom, he was from Gath, from the town of Goliath, the enemy. He was leading, Gath was a leading city of the Philistines, again, the enemies. His name literally means servant of Edom. And Obed-Edom was definitely a Gentile. So he was not an Israelite, but the Lord chose him
And he
to host the presence of the Lord. Yeah, and he stewarded in his home for 3 months, and he was blessed. It even says that the Lord gave him more sons.
Now, this is very important because till this moment, if a Philistine, if an enemy of God had the ark,
It would bring judgment.
it will bring judgment. But in this case, this Gentile guy has the ark in his house. He's not receiving only judgment and curses and destruction. He is receiving blessings from the Lord. So because of the way he was stewarding the presence
because
of
of the
Lord,
reverence that he had.
because of the reverence and the understanding of who was in his house, he starts being blessed by God.
I think we can see here that maybe Uzzah became overly familiar with how to do things.
Right.
And we need to repent from our familiarity and become professionals with the presence of the Lord, because that's very prideful. Like,
Right.
we can become so good at doing something when it comes to the presence of the Lord that we need to return to fearing and to stewarding his presence in a way that we are reverent at his presence, like Obed-Edom. So, the presence was in his house for 3 months, and he was faithful. He stewarded it well, and he was blessed by it.
And then we see David, and he realizes that this Gentile has been blessed. He needs the ark back. He needs the ark in Mount Zion. So now he's going to do it the right way. And he inquires in the law of Moses how it is supposed to be transported. And he finds out that it can only be done in the shoulders of the Levites. Now he's going to change his whole strategy, the whole plan. He's going to go back and get the ark, get it from Obed-Edom's home, and take it to Mount Zion. This image, we want to kind of wrap it up in here. We need to understand that this is a shadow. That's how some people describe this. It's a shadow of what happened with the Gentiles being included in the early church. Because Obed-Edom inclusion and blessing, it's a shadow of what happened when the early churches start spreading the gospel in all the nations, and the Gentiles started to be grafted in. This is in Romans 11. We can take a session to talk only about Romans 11, but Romans 11 talks about that the Gentiles, because of the Jews rejecting Jesus, the Gentiles were grafted in. Obed-Edom is a representation of the Gentile nations being included to the point that we can read in First Chronicles chapter 26 that he was included to the point that he's named, and his 8 sons are named as gatekeepers. After being Gentiles, now they're taking care of the gates because they understood the presence of the Lord, because they had reverence of the presence of the Lord.
Yes. And just as the Gentiles were welcomed into the fullness of the gospel through Jesus, so too Obed-Edom, a Gentile,
And
is
us.
a picture, and us of this blessing of receiving the richness
Right.
of the gospel beyond the Jewish heritage. So now we see that through the Lord, we have been grafted in, just like Obed-Edom.
I know. Even this gets even better because Romans 11 to 12 talks about that in the end times, the Jews are going to be called to jealousy because of the love of the Gentiles for Yeshua. And this is happening here. David was called to jealousy because of the blessings that Obed-Edom's household were experiencing because of the presence. He was called to jealousy because of it. And we as Gentiles, we're going to call the Jews to jealousy because of the love that we show within each other.
So I think this gives us a very important question where we need to wrap this up and just meditate on. And it's, first of all, are we seeking the Lord when it comes to his presence in the house of prayer? Are we actively seeking his spirit, his guidance into how to do things? Even though we know the Lord, even though we've been walking with the Lord for so long, we can never walk with the Lord so long that we stop inquiring. So that's the first question. Second question, are we guarding? Are we being good stewards of the presence of the Lord? And are we seeking his presence actively like David, that we want that in our homes? Just like Obed-Edom, I want the blessing of the Lord's presence in my home. So those are questions that we want to invite you to really ask the Lord today. Just go and have a time of prayer and journal and ask him, Lord, what am I doing in these areas of my life? Because this is a Bible study that we want you to dive in, but we also want it to produce repentance in your heart and change. So go with the Lord, ask him about all these questions, and read all the Bible verses that we read so you can get more revelation from the Spirit.